All right, hi guys, and welcome back to the High Man podcast. It is currently 5:30 in the evening on the 1st of February 2023. It's episode 23 now, I think. It's good to be back. Right. Thank you for joining us again. Today it will be me and Peter talking as always, and today we're going to be talking about the Big Five personality test, referred to as the five-factor model and Ocean commonly. Going to discuss what each of the traits are, some strengths and weaknesses with the traits. We did a little online test ourselves. We're going to discuss our own results and get into it, and just maybe the implications the results can have in your life. But yeah, that's basically what we're going to do today. I hope you guys enjoy it. We'll dive straight in, shall we?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so the Big Five personality test. Well, leadership in general has been a subject of study for the last 200 years, I'd say. There was this thing called the Great Man Theory that first came about, and that was kind of talked about how every now and then you get a great man that was born and they would lead society to these new advancements. Once you get into the 1900s, more clinical studies started to get done about leadership, and through these studies, people were trying to understand: is there any common traits that you can assign to a leader? And then kind of a shoot off from that was: is there a common number of dimensions you can measure someone's personality by to understand the kind of person they are? So originally, it was the Big Five personality test was developed in 1949. It's a trait theory established by a guy called D.W. Fisk. But then it was expanded upon by Norman in 1967, Smith in 67 as well, Goldberg in 1981, and McRae and Costa in 87. It's kind of regarded as the gold standard of personality analytics due to its decade-long research. It's not really disputed because the research has been so extensive, and there's a large consensus that it's quite reliable. So that is the origin of the test. But what is the Big Five personality traits? They are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So firstly, we've got openness, which is a willingness to try new activities. You're open to unconventional and new ideas. You've got high imagination and insight. And people that are that high in openness, they'll try new things, travel to different places, might have interest in things that you've not heard of. Whereas if you're low in openness, you kind of have a traditional approach to life. You maybe struggle to problem solve things that are outside of your knowledge. But what are your thoughts on openness, Peter? Do you think if you're high in openness or low in openness is a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, well, it's quite dependent on the person, because openness, I think, tends to be a high risk, high reward strategy. So for a very open, creative person, most of the most successful people even are probably quite open, because in order to reach that level of success, they need kind of standout ideas which are different from your typical person. However, it's high risk strategy because the vast majority of creative people and the vast majority of new ideas aren't good enough to really exceed what already exists. It takes quite an exceptional idea or level of creativity to really transcend to the point where you can actually be successful with creativity. As it's also quite the Pareto principle of the kind of 80% of success goes to 20% of the people, and that goes all the way up to the 1%, where the 1% of person will have far more than the next 5%, and it goes on. So it's kind of an uneven distribution of success. and that's what you get with being highly creative. Whereas for a less creative person, they're more likely to take a more traditional path, and that's more secure and reliable. And a lot of times that'll be more successful. So yeah, it's definitely a trade-off there. It's hard. You can't really say one is better than the other.
Yeah, it seems like with high openness, there is obviously like this generation of crazy and innovative ideas, but the thing that's kind of lacking, even if you're high in openness, innately, is like the implementation of these new ideas, like you're saying. Not to say that if you're high in openness, you can't implement these ideas practically and actually like show them to the world and like show their real use. Obviously, amazing examples of that with like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, like, just to name a few. But it was interesting you said if you're low in openness that you'll take maybe a more traditional approach, and that can kind of lead to more success. Like we probably discussed it before. Like I guess it depends on how would you describe success. Like is going to a secure job where you're getting a safe, steady wage every single month and year. Is that successful, or would you rather be a person that takes more risks and has the opportunity to gain more reward?
Yeah, it's a hard question, and it depends on the situation, because obviously it's more successful if you're the top 1% creative person who gets millions of listens on a song or sells your artwork for millions, or other creative endeavors. Like that's obviously more successful than the stable path. But the creative path is also one way more likely to end up with nothing as well, due to the Pareto principle. And most people will have no success in creative realms. So, you know, it's a matter of security, really.
Yeah. Do you think maybe like one of the observations of the big five personality traits is that they become they change as you grow older. Like you become less extroverted, more agreeable. Maybe I think it's maybe less open. Do you think one of the reasons that maybe people become less open when they get older is simply because they start a family? Like when you're young, you have such luxury and the like low amount of responsibility that you have to anyone else and even yourself, that you can afford to take risks and afford to fail. Whereas when you get to your late 20s, early 30s, you're going to have to provide for someone or something, so you can't necessarily take those risks.
Yeah, I think that sounds realistic. That because with openness, it's kind of being able to live in a more abstract space in your mind, whereas when you have real world responsibilities, you need to attend to them. You can't just be off with the fairies, so to speak.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we can discuss actually. There's probably a lot of reasons why it changes over time for all the different traits, and that interacts with each other. So kind of the example you gave there, like someone, they might become less open as they get older, but they'll also have to become more conscientious because they need to handle their responsibilities more. But I guess let's go through all the traits before talking to you specifically about these. About what happens with age.
So next in the ocean, is it an acronym or a mnemonic? I think it's a mnemonic, maybe. I don't know which one it is. But yeah, so we've got conscientiousness next. This is about impulse control, your organisation, and thoughtfulness. So those who are highly conscientious are organised. They analyse how their behaviour affects others as well. And then if you're low in conscientiousness, you're likely to dislike structure and schedules, and you're more likely to procrastinate as well. I never realised that conscientiousness until doing a bit of research about this was about impulse control and organisation. Because later on we'll discuss our own results, but I'm quite high in, not quite high, but I'm highest in conscientiousness, I think. But my impulse control wouldn't necessarily be highly highly what's the word, controlled. That's
Yeah.
the word. And I wouldn't necessarily be the most organised when it comes to like uni work. Although we'll discuss our results later. But do you think conscientiousness is? It seems to be something that's, in my mind, regarded as like the thing you want to attain. It doesn't necessarily.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be anything bad about being low in conscientiousness.
Yeah. Do you mean there's not anything good about being low in conscientiousness?
Yeah, is that not what? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, you said. Yeah, sorry. You just. Yeah. 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 I think I've seen that being conscientious is associated with success in all areas of life. So that's career success in terms of how much money you make. I think also in terms of career satisfaction, also kind of marriage, divorce rates go down with higher conscientiousness, and relationship satisfaction and stuff like that. So it does seem as if conscientiousness is overall a very positive thing. However, there is a price. I think there is a price you pay for being higher in conscientiousness, which is that you're a lot harsher on yourself and you're not able to be happy with less. So you're very driven, and that's likely to make you take action which will improve your life in the long term. But at the same time, you kind of sacrifice some amount of short-term happiness and maybe short-term kind of life satisfaction, because you're so driven that very highly conscientious people will just feel terrible about themselves if they're not working all the time, and obviously that can have its own problems. But I do think conscientiousness is something that's good to develop for most people, and kind of the big thing I see conscientiousness being is the ability to delay gratification, be able to choose to do things difficult in the short term to improve your life in the long term. And obviously there are other elements to it, like you mentioned, kind of orderliness and being more organized is a part of conscientiousness. But yeah, I think a big part of it is about being able to delay instant gratification.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think when you talk about being high in conscientiousness, maybe can lead to like the over analysis of one's like behavior and feelings, and that can kind of maybe hinder like the ability to just enjoy the moment. I think that can kind of be fixed, not fixed, but I think that's probably something that might be more enhanced if you're highly neurotic, which we'll discuss shortly. So I'm not too sure if simply being high in conscientiousness is going to hinder someone from necessarily being satisfied with themselves and their own actions. That's just my opinion at the moment. But moving on, we next have extroversion. The simplest definition of extroversion, from what I can see online, I've heard a few times, is extroversion is when someone gets energized in the company of others and from social interaction. If you're extroverted, you're usually talkative, assertive, you have higher amounts of emotional expression, and when you're high in this, there tends to be a person that thrives being a centre of attention. They enjoy meeting new people, and usually they might have like a bigger group of friends or like a larger network of their like a larger social network. Whereas if you're low in extroversion, introversion as it's known, you prefer solitude, and social interactions can be quite taxing, and they take a lot of energy out of you. I don't know how the research on the Big Five is quite widely accepted, but extroversion and introversion is something that's always kind of confused me, because for my own example, I'm very extroverted while being at home, and like being with my mates and my close friends like, out and about. But if I'm in like a new public situation with strangers, then I'm more introverted. And
Yeah.
like I don't know if extroversion is a simple black and white scale. Like not black and white. I don't know if it's even necessarily like a spectrum, like 1 to 10. I think it's very much context dependent. Would you agree or would you disagree?
Yeah, I think your behavior is definitely going to be context dependent. So you will act in a more introverted way with people you're more comfortable with. But I do think the effectiveness of the scale does still exist, because like it doesn't necessarily mean you're not an introverted person just because you're very social around people you're close to or in smaller groups. Like that is characteristic of someone who is an introverted person. So, but it's obviously possible to manifest different traits in different situations, which might seem like it doesn't add up with your trait, and perhaps that's true with all the different traits as well. Like in a situation where someone's got a lot of pressure on them to work, they'll act in a far more conscientious way than someone who might be more conscientious, but they're not in a currently demanding situation, for example. So, but I do think there are underlying things about your personality which are true, but perhaps that goes to show how you can go about changing things. Like I gave an example there about conscientiousness. If you wanted to become more conscientious, then you should put yourself in a situation which requires that of you, and that will force you to become that. So maybe that's one way you can look to change your personality, which is maybe something we can go into a bit more depth on later on.
Yeah, 100%. Next up in the 5 traits, we have agreeableness. Kind of references like trust, altruism, kindness, and like affection. If you're high in agreeableness, you'll be inclined to help others. You're quite comforting, you cooperate well, and you have a lot of empathy for other people. Whereas if you're low in agreeableness, i.e. you're disagreeable, you're maybe more likely to be manipulative and nasty to others, and you kind of lack sympathy and care, and there might be like a lack of interest in others. The data from what I've seen, not data, but like the trends that I've seen and what I've read is kind of, although being agreeable sounds good and disagreeable sounds bad, disagreeable people kind of are more likely to get what they want, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they're more willing to fight for it and sacrifice someone else's, honour, pride, or like sacrifice embarrassing someone else for their own personal gain, which isn't necessarily a bad thing at all times, I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, like the way you presented it there, kind of with disagreeableness, it kind of came across as if it's like an inherently bad thing, which I don't think it is. Like a disagreeable person, they'll be more competitive, and they'll also be less worried about offending someone, so they might be more willing to say uncomfortable truths, whereas avoiding that for the sake of not offending someone, I don't believe is the right thing to do. They'll also be more likely to stick up for themselves, certainly, and I'd argue even stick up for other people more, even if they feel less sympathy for other people, but they also are more willing to step on people's toes. They're not willing to kind of go about not trying to offend another person. Like, so if a disagreeable person has good morals, then I think that makes them probably even more a force for good in the world than someone who's too agreeable and, kind of not willing to act out their morals to the highest degree because they don't want to impose that on other people.
Yeah. So I guess, would you say? No, I think you're right in saying the way I worded it was a bit negative overall for disagreeableness, but could it be that even if you're disagreeable, you might not care for others, but you still care for the principles that you believe in, and that then being disagreeable would make you stand up for those principles, and in doing so, you'd be standing up for other people just by chance, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. But obviously, like, it can go the other way. Like, I think in terms of personality traits, disagreeableness is the best predictor of someone going to jail, which is a large reason why males go to jail far more than females, because on average, so the difference is between males and females. If you were to say the male is more agreeable, then you'd be wrong 60% of the time. So it's only kind of a small difference on the mean, at the mean, because still 40% of the time, picking a random male and random female from the population, you're going to be wrong with that statement 40% of the time, saying the man's more disagreeable, but most of the time the man will be more disagreeable. However, an important thing to note about these personality traits is they have a normal distribution, which means most people are centered around the mean, and then as you go away from the mean, there's less and less people towards the extremes. And for someone so even though there's only a small difference at the mean, it means that there's a large difference at the extremes, because the top 1% of people, like the way the normal distribution works, the top 1% of people, the top 1% of disagreeable people are going to be 99% men. That's just how the distribution works. So it's, whilst we're more similar than different with these overlapping traits between males and females, like, we see the differences at the extremes, which can kind of be used. It does actually explain a lot of kind of sociological things, like, for example, why men are more in jail more than women, because of the psychological traits are different.
Yeah, it's crazy, the distribution curves, although it looks so similar. The implications that has on society is huge, like you said. I don't know what the ratio is of men to women in jails, but it must be something crazy, like at least 5 to 10 men for every fucking one woman or something. Yeah,
at least that sort of thing. And that, I think that's probably because of the difference in disagreeableness.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So finally, our last trait is neuroticism, which is kind of the like your reaction to negative emotions and stuff like that. So it's kind of to do with sadness, moodiness, emotional instability, and then like a physical and an emotional response to perceived threats in your life. So if you're highly neurotic, you will have mood swings more likely, anxiety, you're more irritable, you overthink things, and you might find it difficult to relax in your own company. Whereas if you're low in neuroticism, you will be more stable, emotionally resilient, and you're kind of rarely sad or depressed. I don't know if there is much advantage to being highly neurotic. Could you maybe argue that you might be more empathetic to other people and understand the plight of other people's existence? Or do you think that even if you did, because being highly neurotic, you kind of just get overwhelmed by that yourself and the focus would come back to yourself?
Yeah, I think people who are highly neurotic, like, they certainly suffer more. They have a lot more negative emotion, and it's a lot more difficult to deal with. But the downside to being, you can argue if it's a downside or not, it will. But the issue is someone who's very low in neuroticism, they're going to, first of all, they'll take a lot more risks. This is why if we come back to the sex differences, men on average are lower in neuroticism than women, and maybe we can talk like more in depth about the sex differences for each of the traits, and the reasons why those exist. But men do far more dangerous things, and which leads to men dying more often in like stupid accidents. So there's that
trait.
Yeah, you're more of a risk taker, which can be a good or a bad thing, but it certainly doesn't come without its consequences. And I also think there's this saying, I think it's by Tony Robbins, it's like people only change when the pain of their current situation is worse than the pain of having to go through the change. So for people who don't experience a lot of negative emotion, negative emotion can be a big driver for us to change and improve our lives if we're not satisfied, whereas someone who is very low in negative emotion might never really have that drive. And you can say it's fair enough to them if they're satisfied and happy with the way things are, but you could also say that maybe they could be far more than they were if they perhaps felt more guilty about the fact that they weren't living up to their potential, for example. That would be a form of negative emotion, which obviously isn't pleasant in the moment, but in the long term, it could drive you to improve. So there are certain, with all of these traits, there are trade-offs. I don't think it's absolute what's good or bad. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting to be fair. Right, so that is all of the traits kind of explained. We thought we'd maybe go on to discuss our own results. Want to do that now, or?
Yeah, so now we're going to go through our own traits. So we'll go through them one by one, going through the ocean order. So openness, I got 65% for this test on openness. What did you get?
I got 91% on this test.
91%, jeez. Yeah. Yeah, after that. Yeah, like with these tests, I've done them all a few times. I've done Big Five personalities a few times, and it varies a bit, but openness, like in the moderately high range for me. And then yours seems to be in the, like, even higher than that, like high range, very high range. Did that surprise you at all, or do you think that's quite accurate?
I'd say it's quite accurate. I've been doing like a Big Five test twice, I think, maybe 3 times, but it usually seems to be a true representation of what I think about myself in terms of those personality traits. But yeah, I'd say I'm quite open. I like to explore different ideas from different people, 100%. And I'm less open to trying new activities, though. That's one thing I've gotten better at the last 2 years since coming to uni, or 3 years, because that's kind of what uni like makes you do, is try new things. But I used to never enjoy doing things that weren't necessarily with the status quo.
Yeah.
So it did surprise me a little bit, but maybe like the way I'm answering it is self-serving, so it makes me, I don't know. I think there's always going to be a bias in the way that one answers these questions.
Yeah. It's hard to know about whether that's
100%.
like true reasons you're answering it, or just like trying to rationalize it. It's hard to say. But yeah, my result with openness seems about right. I'd say I'm very like open to ideas, and I like doing different things, and I've got quite a few different hobbies, and I go back and forth between doing different things. And but I wouldn't say I'm that creative a person. So I'm interested in a lot of things, but I haven't done that many creative things, like creating my own stuff. I don't know. So yeah, I don't think interesting ideas. Interesting. Go on, sorry.
I think I used to think creativity was about output of like amazing works of art, but like, for example, this podcast is quite creative. Like,
Yeah.
especially with you, like kind of being the brains behind the technicality of it, how putting it together and stuff. And then like that's trying a new activity, and then like I think creativeness. I think it could be really small things as well in life. But I'd say
Yeah.
I'm quite creative and like finding more efficient ways of doing stuff. Like even like just little things like cleaning dishes or something. Like there's just certain ways I like to explore things to become like a few seconds faster, or like for things to look better or whatever. So I wouldn't necessarily assume that creativity is all about output of like artistic works, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like something I've found with being quite an open person is I get drawn to different interests, and I do think that maybe kind of holds me back a little bit in some ways, because I kind of sometimes end up with this grass is green on the other side type of mentality. Like I see this new bright shiny object and I want to go after that, rather than just kind of being more like focused on a smaller number of things, which would probably help me to be more successful. Like I sometimes think that for myself. I try to do too many different things to not make as much progress in each individual thing. Have you ever found that with yourself?
Yeah, I think I can understand what you're saying. The silly analogy I would give would be something like it'd be like when you watch a TV series and then your mate tells you about a new TV series and you're halfway through the season of one and then you start another and you never finish the first one, and then that just kind of dominoes and you keep starting new things like a TV series and not actually finishing them. But yeah, I hear that, but I don't know if I myself individually I would necessarily think I'd do too many different things. I think I maybe do about the right number of things, but I definitely do find myself interested in other things. Like the other day, I was like, I really want to start archery for some reason. I just thought it'd be like sick to do. Like, you just have your own back garden one day, and you just shoot a few arrows every day, like the real samurai life or whatever. But
you've been listening to Rogan or something?
Nah, I got a new PS4 game, and so this samurai game, and it's just sick. And I was just like, oh, I want to shoot some arrows. But I can see that being a bit of a danger if I've got more autonomy of my life, if I've got like more money and stuff and more opportunity to go explore different things. But yeah.
Right, shall we talk about conscientiousness?
Yes.
Yeah, so I got 87% on conscientiousness. What did you get?
Oh, nice. Or 80%.
So we're quite similar on that. I'd say with my conscientiousness, so something with the big 5 personality traits is there are different. So you have the 5 traits, and then there are also facets, which are the traits being broken down into a smaller number of things. And I've seen, doing a bit of research, I saw that there's somewhere each trait is broken down into 6 different facets of kind of smaller and more specific traits. And then, but yeah, with conscientiousness, I feel like so it's kind of made up with Jordan Peterson's test, for example. He breaks it into kind of how hardworking you are versus how orderly you are. And I found, I think I'm more orderly than I am hardworking. So like when I did his test, I did it a few years ago, so I can't remember the exact numbers, but in terms of orderliness, I was like some ridiculous, like 99th percentile or something. And then like just hardworkiness was kind of average. So yeah, so within each of the traits, it kind of does vary a bit. So yeah, whilst I'm very kind of orderly and organized, I do still think my conscientiousness in terms of being more hardworking and disciplined is something that I do need to work on still.
Yeah. I guess though, if you're, like we were saying earlier, if you're almost too hardworking, there's not going to be much time to be taken out to just enjoy the simple pleasantries of life.
Yeah, that's a trade-off, isn't it? But I think it's a trade-off worth making. So And yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like some of the feelings of feeling like guilty about not working hard enough. Like, I don't think like the two ways of overcoming that would be to let go of wanting to be harder working, or to just become harder working to meet what you think you should be. And
yeah,
perhaps there's a trap there of chasing something, and then once you get to a certain point, the point moves. So maybe it's a situation you'd never be satisfied. But I do think, feeling guilty for not being as hardworking as I think I could be. Like, I think the proper way to deal with that is to become more hardworking and disciplined, not to kind of let go of my desire to be those things.
yeah. I hear that. So, would you say the feeling of guilt for lacking the feeling of guilt for not living up to your potential to work hard, do you think that comes more so with the higher you are in conscientiousness? Like, if someone was really low conscientiousness, would they have any feeling of guilt for not living up to their potential almost?
Yeah, that's what I believe personally. What you just said right there. Yeah, I think someone who's low in conscientiousness wouldn't be too bothered if they weren't necessarily working hard.
Do you think that motivates someone though to? Because I'm high enough in conscientiousness, and I'm the classic kind of leaves my work to the last minute for school and stuff, and uni. And I think I don't necessarily feel guilty about that. Like, I think I do maybe subconsciously, but that guilt maybe in the moment of panic when I'm trying to get things done in the last 2-3 weeks, I'm a bit like, shit, I need to improve the way I do this and start earlier. But that being high in conscientiousness maybe evokes those feelings, but it doesn't actually necessarily change my my approach to doing the work earlier. So how would you recommend maybe going about changing your approach to be harder working for a longer period of time?
Yeah. Well, there's a thing you could say, like, if you're satisfied with the way you are in that area, then it's like, do you really need to change it? That's something you need to decide for yourself whether you actually want to. But then let's assume you do decide that you want to. This kind of comes into a discussion of how you actually change your traits. Like, do you have the power to do that? And the way I've heard that you go about changing your traits is you kind of look at the micro routines of someone who, so for example, someone who's conscientious, a habit might be keeping a schedule every day and then working towards accurately following that schedule. That's something of a conscientious person. Or making your bed every morning would be another trait of a conscientious person. So doing that would make you more conscientious. And if, let's say, your extroversion was something you wanted to become more extroverted, then a habit you could do was be trying to have a conversation with a stranger every day or something like that. That would help you become more extroverted. So I think the power in changing the traits comes from being able to look at the habits and implementing that. I think that's probably the most practical way of going about it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, do you think if someone was to say, like, for example, if I was to say I'm satisfied with my conscientiousness and I'm satisfied with the amount of work I put into university because it gets the results that I want, although I feel like I'm satisfied with it, I do still feel like there's potential loss. If I have those feelings of potential loss, would you infer that could mean that I'm not necessarily as satisfied as one might say? If there's small feelings of guilt, like that.
Yeah, it's hard to say, really. Like, so from the outside perspective, you could look at it and think you're not living up to your potential. You should be doing more. And maybe it would take someone who you respect going up to you and telling you that, and then in that would probably create some negative emotion, having someone you respect tell you that you're not as good as you should be. Like, that's kind of a painful thing, but that will help lead to growth. So you could argue that even if you are satisfied currently, maybe you should be looking to improve, and the fact that you're satisfied means you're not living up to your potential. But it's kind of a whole nother debate about satisfaction and happiness, which things we've talked about before, and I'm sure we'll talk about again.
Yeah, 100%. So should we move on to extroversion next? I think it is in the acronym or mnemonic, whatever it's called.
Yeah, I got 22%. I got 22%.
Oh, okay.
What did you get?
I got 41% for extroversion.
Yeah, it seems about right. I feel like with extroversion, it is one you can, like, if you know, it's probably one of the first ones that you get to know when you know someone. When you start interacting with them, you can kind of tell a little bit whether they're more of an introvert or extrovert. Like, I'm sure it's no surprise to you that I'm quite introverted.
Clearly,
yeah. It seems, for your like 41%, that seems about right. Like, close to the middle, but slightly to the introvert side. Like, yeah, it's quite easy to see. Yeah,
that's an interesting point you made, though, about how I've never thought about which traits are maybe most easy to identify when you first meet someone. But yeah, I do agree that extroversion is probably the one you can measure straight away. Or not straight away, but you can measure the fastest upon meeting someone.
Yeah, even just observing someone, it's because obviously it's to do with what you're like in social interactions. So
yeah, do you think you could display a really confident body language while being extremely introverted?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, to be fair, I don't think, I think there is a difference between confidence and kind of extroversion. Like, an introverted person could be very confident, and so they obviously have good body language and stuff, but they just probably wouldn't be talking a lot if they're around a bunch of people. That doesn't necessarily mean they're not comfortable in that situation. And then you could say with an extrovert, like, there might be someone who talks a lot, but they're always kind of looking for other people's approval in the things that they say. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily, although I think for introverted people, they are more likely, for example, to be like socially anxious and stuff, and to lack confidence in social situations, which is obviously something that introverted people should probably work on, and then extroverted people could probably work on more spending time in their own company and being able to do that.
Yeah. So what we've got next, agreeableness next, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I got 56% on this test. Although when I've done other tests, I usually get lower than that. But yeah, what about you?
Got 67%.
Yeah, does that result surprise you at all? Would you say you're a moderately agreeable person?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, to be fair. I think I've got less agreeable over time. I think I was not like programmed as a kid, but like in terms of like when you're brought up, like you get programmed by like your social interactions, your parents, and like your friends, and like the media, into like the way you need to think. And I think that my upbringing made me a very agreeable person. And like in the last 2/3, but definitely in the last year, I've become less agreeable because I'm been more active in trying to integrate my shadow, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, but I definitely say I'm less agreeable now than I was. I'm not sure if I need to go any lower or higher, but yeah, it's been interesting to see the personal change in my own life.
Yeah.
What about yourself? you not necessarily happy with the result? Because I don't know if there's a question of being happy with it or maybe just accepting of it.
Yeah, well, it's weird because like most of the time I'd get a bit under average in agreeableness, but I used to think I was a lot more agreeable than I think I now realise that I am. And I think the reason for that is that I think everyone in my family is quite disagreeable. So compared to them, I'm more agreeable, which kind of made me think, oh, I must be an agreeable person. But
Right.
I don't think that's. I think it's easy to compare, like within a family. It's easy to compare yourself to other people. Like an example I saw of this was Ronda Rousey. She was talking about how like she's quite an intense person, and she was doing an interview and she was saying about how in her family, like she's really the chilled out one or something. So she considered herself like kind of this chilled out person, even though she's actually like really kind of intense person.
Yeah.
Which I think does kind of show that like you can compare yourself to family members, and that can kind of skew your perceptions of what you actually are compared to them. So yeah, I think I'm more disagreeable than I used to think that I was. Like I do say I feel fair. Like I don't really like confrontation, but I do like competition.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I've got kind of traits on both sides of that. So around the middle kind of makes sense for me.
Yeah. I'd be interested to like get a proper professional test done where like someone observes you for like maybe like a week in different contexts, and then you get like a full scale report of your personality traits, like context dependent as well. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think the difficulty with doing like the online surveys and stuff is particularly like because I know a fair bit about this, the Big Five personality test. As the questions are being asked, like I consciously or subconsciously know like what the questions, like whether a question is asking basically, are you introverted or extroverted, or are you agreeable or disagreeable? Like I kind of see through the questions a little bit like that. So perhaps that kind of skews my answers to some degree based on what I currently believe. But yeah, it would be interesting to have like some external people judge that type of thing. And I think you can just get other people who know you, for example, to take a test on your behalf and just answer the questions like, do you think this person is this and this? And that can be maybe a good way of getting that outside perspective.
Yeah.
Do you think like getting the outside perspective would be more accurate than your own results? Because whilst they might be able to be more objective about it, at the same time, there's no way there's no way that they'd know you better than you know yourself, because you're with yourself all the time.
Yeah. I think humans, although we have feelings about different things, our action will not always line up with those feelings. So I think it would be useful to get external viewpoints on your personality, because that will be a representation of how you act, at least to those people individually. Most likely that's going to be an indication of how you act socially. That's not necessarily going to be a true representation of your beliefs on the personality traits, though. I'm not too sure how important that is, because although I might score high in, like for example, not necessarily my example, but you might score high in extroversion, but you do truly believe you're an introvert. The only reason you score high is because you want to push your boundaries so you can become more successful in like a career, for example.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much one is more important than the other. I don't know. It's a difficult one. I think both would be equally important. I don't know what your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's it seems about right. There's obviously positives and negatives to both sides of it, and perhaps if you have someone else take a test on your behalf, and the results are very different to what you've done for yourself, that's kind of an indicator in maybe an incongruence between a belief you have about yourself versus how you actually act.
And maybe in a cynical manner, it could be maybe that your belief's not different to your action, but you could just be manipulative. So you might act in a conscientious and agreeable way in order to manipulate people around you for your own personal gain, even if you don't have those traits. But I don't know how many people do that. I don't know if it's a conscious thing or subconscious thing that people do that, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a consciously like manipulating type of thing, but there probably is some level of, it comes back to a conversation about the shadow. Like there's a certain person that we want to present to the world, and there's traits which we have which don't necessarily fit that. But I guess that could even be a problem taking the test yourself, because you're going to answer questions perhaps more closely to what you'd ideally be, not how you actually are. And you might also act like that. So someone else might not necessarily, getting someone else to do the test for you might not necessarily like stop you from having these misconceptions, because if you're acting like not in agreement with your true kind of nature, then yeah, that won't show up on a test if you get someone else to do it based on how you act, if that makes sense. But
yeah. I think last year you got neuroticism, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
What was your score, Peter?
I got 16% on this, which is lower than I'd usually get, to be honest. I'd say most of the time I get maybe moderately low, like 30 to 40%, but kind of just below average, really. So yeah, maybe I was feeling particularly emotionally stable as I was doing this test. But yeah, I think I am probably realistically like 30, maybe 40% kind of neuroticism. Seems about right for me.
Yeah. Yes.
What about yourself?
I got 11%.
Yeah.
Which is...
Does that surprise you?
It does and it doesn't. Like I don't know, for like big things that like happen in one's life that could be described as tragic, they don't necessarily affect me, because I just don't see the point of getting upset about something outside of your control. But then I do find myself getting like slightly annoyed at like little trivial things at times. Like one example could be like if I go to like a restaurant with like a mate or like a family member, and the server's just like a terrible server, like that will just piss me off, and it will make me enjoy my meal less, because I'm just like, why can't the server just do like a decent job? It's not difficult to just like be polite and all this shit.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is neuroticism, or if that's just like simply getting annoyed in the moment. But yeah, I'd say I'm definitely lower than average on neuroticism, probably higher though than 11%. There's probably some self-skewing answering when I was doing the test, or maybe I'm just a really fucking happy guy.
Yeah, maybe that's the case. But yeah, I do think for myself as well, like obviously I aspire to be a more emotionally stable person, so perhaps I answer the questions in that way. So yeah, I reckon I'm probably a little bit below average, maybe around average, to be fair. But yeah, so that's the traits.
Quite hard to like quantify. Am I going to be feeling slightly negative for it's 20% of the time? Is that average, or like how measurable is this average?
Yeah, it's hard to say, because I think the thing with like negative emotion is you actually right? You don't see most people's amount of negative emotion. So whilst you might think you feel quite a fair bit compared to how much you see other people feeling, like most people feel those type of things in private, in their own minds. So yeah, maybe it's easy to assume that other people are more emotionally stable than they are, because yeah, this is something I've been thinking about recently, because yeah, I do find in moments I feel like I'm not particularly emotionally stable, but then I kind of think, oh, from an outsider's perspective, no one would be able to know that. So it probably goes both ways.
Yeah, it's definitely a very British thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's some value in suppressing your emotions. So
yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think. I don't know if it's a Reddit and something or. Oh yeah, that's it. I was listening to John Bernthal, the actor out like The Walking Dead and The Punisher, and that movie Fury. He went to go study acting at like this Russian school for acting, and so wild renowned, crazy talent there and shit. And he was saying like a mad thing about the Russians is like, although they're quite fucking harsh and brutal, people like are really, really open with their emotions. Like he was saying, like you chat to like a randomer on the street, or like you chat to someone that you've just recently been acquainted to, and like they'd be like telling you like their tragic life story and like the tragedies of it in depth.
yeah,
And I don't know if he said that they'd cry, and then that would kind of just be it, and then you'd be over it, and you kind of move on to something else. But it's mad, like the difference in culture between like the British and the Russians on that in that facet at least. Like British people don't fucking chat to newly met people about their emotions and tragedies of life that they've experienced. Whereas in Russia, it's a very common thing to just spill your guts, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I feel like in the UK, it's kind of goes with a lot of things. Maybe it's because like in the UK we kind of take the piss out of everything, so you maybe wouldn't want to expose that side to you because you don't want to get the piss taken out of you.
But it's talking about.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like perhaps like talking about how the different traits interact, perhaps because I'm more introverted, I'm not going to show my emotions to other people just because I'm more going to keep it to myself, as opposed to an extroverted person who might be a bit more theatrical when they have some negative emotion.
So that's the test explained and our results. There's a few reasons why it's important to like know about this model and know about your own results. It's quite a big thing nowadays. I don't know how recent it is, but I think about the last 10 years, it's become a huge thing for psychometric tests like this to be done for employers. There's a big trend for employers to know your personality because it helps them understand the employee relationships. If you were to fit into their team, it helps them understand employee motivations, and it gives them a chance to like build diverse teams. Like you don't want a fucking group of just extroverts or a group of just highly open people or disagreeable people. Like as we always come to the conclusion, it's always good to have a nice medium or a hybrid mix. Do you think there's any other reasons that it's maybe? Well, how would you phrase it? Would you phrase that knowing this test and your own results is vital for success, or is important for personal well-being? Like, what words would you use to describe it?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that knowing your specific results to this test is absolutely essential, but I think self-awareness is absolutely important and valuable. And then this is just kind of a tool you can use to become more self-aware and to kind of understand your behaviors and perhaps areas you want to improve in. So I think it does have some personal value. Although, do you think there's some risk with doing kind of personality tests and different stuff that you maybe are boxing yourself in, and perhaps it could create some self-limiting beliefs about the way you are? Do you think that's a risk?
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Like when it said I've got 11% on neuroticism, I was kind of sure it was wrong, and there could be a risk in the future. I don't think it's going to be a risk now that I've identified it, but excuse me. Like if someone did a test and found they had really, really low neuroticism, if they came into a spout of like high negative emotions, it might overwhelm them, and to the point where they're like, "Oh, but I'm not neurotic. Like this can't be happening," and it will just stifle their like ambition, maybe distracted. That's one way I could see it kind of being negative. What ways do you think?
Yeah, I think it can go both ways, actually. Like you gave the example of neuroticism there. I think another issue is if someone was high in neuroticism, they might kind of use that as an excuse not to change it. They'll rationalize the reason why they are overly emotional and unemotionally stable. That they'll rationalize that by saying, "Oh, it's just kind of this predetermined trait that I have," and it maybe can lead them to not take as much responsibility for improving themselves. I think that's a bit of a trap with these personality tests. It can make it kind of seem that we're not able to change, and I think a more powerful belief and like a growth mindset would be that if I take the right steps, then I'll be able to change for the positive, even in terms of these personality traits. So yeah, I don't think people should look at it like, yeah, this is like I'm stuck like this. They should look at it like, oh, this is a tool for me to be more self-aware, and then realize the areas I'm able to improve. It should never be an excuse to not improve.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of putting it. But yeah, I think I myself and possibly many other people have fallen into the trap of like trying to self-diagnose like problems and certain things like that. And I think a lot of the time, maybe I'm wrong, but people try and self-diagnose because, like you said, it gives them an excuse. Like, oh, I am this. That's why I've not done this. That's a bit. There's comfort in knowing why you're not succeeding, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you aren't doing what you need to do, I guess.
Yeah, it shouldn't take responsibility away from you.
Yeah, 100%. But it was interesting how you said about knowing these results gives you a framework almost on it gives you a viewpoint of the areas that you might want to improve on. Like in one of my university modules, we talked about leadership because that was the whole module was about leadership and practice, and there's different theories like the trait theory, behavior theory. Trait theory is kind of like you're born with these traits, and because they're innate, they will naturally select who becomes leaders and stuff and who doesn't. Whereas the behavioural theory is more about, although you're born with these innate traits, a person can learn to change their behaviour in a given situation, and then they can learn to act as a leader would in a leadership role. And then there's other theories that there's no real need to get into, but the literature isn't necessarily 100% agreeing on what theory is best because it's such a difficult thing to measure. But I guess one of the things that I noticed throughout the whole research of it was, although it's difficult to measure what leadership theory works, like if you're innate or not, it seems like the qualities the qualities and traits a person has, can be changed and it can be acted upon or not acted upon in different situations. Which gives me hope, to be fair. It's quite nice to see that you might feel like you're stuck because you're introverted and you won't be able to maybe get to a position of power because you won't want to be in the limelight, but there's probably like 1,000 different examples of people like that in the world.
Yeah.
And like the research that I was looking into kind of backs me up on that belief, which was nice.
Yeah. I kind of think that with research, that backs up the point that leans to the side of, oh, these is predetermined factors. So it would be like the trait theory that you were just saying. It believes that our outcomes are caused by predetermined factors that we don't have control over. I feel like those type of research, it doesn't. The issue is that it kind of works off of like the averages of people. So most people aren't. So if the question is like, is it possible to change? And you do a wide scale study about how much people have changed over time, most people wouldn't have changed, but that doesn't mean it's not possible to change. Mm-hmm. Like if you were to put the effort in. So I do think like these kind of studies can have the danger of skewing towards the average and saying the average person doesn't change, so you're probably not going to be able to. Like, I just don't agree with that personally. So yeah, I like the idea that people have the ability to change. And yeah, I think that's the right idea. I think with the proper effort and the proper action, people can become so different that they wouldn't even be able to recognize themselves from a few years ago or however long a time period.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, maybe. Well, I guess it depends on the person, but there's always going to be a risk with knowing your results and boxing yourself in. But then again, I guess it's just if you're educated and if you're educated with the simple fact that you can always improve, then you're fine, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking of like nature and nurture, in the research, I found that one study which looked at 123 pairs of identical twins and 127 pairs of fraternal twins, the findings suggested that like the heritability of each trait was, for extroversion, was 53%, agreeableness was 41%, conscientiousness was 44%, neuroticism was 41%, and then openness was 61%.
Yeah.
So they're all kind of fairly genetic enough. Some more than average, more than others, but like the theory, like the behavioural theory, saying even if these things are inherited, there is still one's ability to go against the natural tendencies that they may have and act in a more, I don't know, more productive way, maybe more responsible way, depending on the trait and situation. But yeah, do you think there's much use in knowing if it's nature v nurture?
I guess if it's more nurture, then that would lead you to think it's more changeable in the future. Although, kind of the whole nature nurture thing with nature, like they're both kind of predetermined in a way, because it's like nature versus nurture. Nature in terms of your genetics, and then nurture how you were brought up in the first few years of your life. Like both of those things aren't things you can change now. So yeah, and yeah, it's in those stats there were interesting. So what they're saying, like most of the traits are kind of around about 50% heritable versus nurture.
Yeah, the highest one was openness. That's 61%.
61% heritable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That seems about right, to be fair. I think it does kind of seem like introverts versus extroverts, like even from within one family. Like, I don't know. It seems like it's kind of predetermined, even if people have very similar upbringings, and extroversion versus introversion can be very different. But I guess that could be said for all the traits. But
yeah. True.
But yeah.
True. Yeah, moving on to, I think you said earlier, like men and women are largely the same, but there are like slight gender differences.
Yeah.
Weinsberg and De Jong, in 2011 studied the big five traits, and they found that women tend to score higher on extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism than men.
Yeah.
Does that seem about right to you?
Yeah, I think it does. So we mentioned it. We can maybe talk about the reasons why these things exist, why the differences exist. So if we start with agreeableness, I think like we're kind of wired. Women are more wired to take more responsibility for taking care of a child. So in that sense, they do need to be more caring. I think that's probably a large reason for it. What do you think? Do you think there are any other reasons why agreeableness is different? Maybe men need to be more competitive as well.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, women, because they're more likely, like in terms of our history of our species, they were the ones that looked after the child in the first few years of their life. And like in the first 2 years, you have to attend to every single cry that that child makes. And you need to be agreeable to put yourself against staying in bed and like put yourself out of your comfort zone and just attend to every need. That's definitely one of the reasons they're more agreeable. I never really thought about why men might be more disagreeable. But like you said, that competitiveness, especially on a physical level, might have influenced it. I don't know how much I believe in that though, because like there's a guy called Steve Peters who's like a mindset doctor. He's worked with like a few Olympians and like these high performing athletes, and he talks. I listened to his podcast on the Diary CEO the other day, and they were talking about how, although it might seem that like in order to be successful and at the top of the hierarchy, you'd want to be kind of like powerful and disagreeable and stuff like that. In terms of the human species and chimpanzees, our closest relative, it seemed that cooperation was more important. So like the studies they've done on chimpanzees, like they found that sometimes it'd be the smallest chimp, the physically weak chimp, would be the one that could be their leader because he's formed networks of relationships. So cooperation was almost more important than disagreeableness. So I don't know how much I believe in if that's why women are more agreeable. It's because men are more disagreeable in terms of that facet of competition.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting debate. I think with men there is, although cooperation is obviously important, I do think there is more of a demand for competitiveness because there's obviously the higher, like the selection pressure for mating is on the men, and that probably comes from the fact that women pay a much higher cost for pregnancy. So there's a higher demand on the men to be of a certain standard, and they'll only pick kind of the best man they can really get. So that creates a certain like need for a man to be more competitive, and so although I'm not really too sure, perhaps it does just come from more so that women bear more responsibility for child taking, and that's maybe the bigger reason for the difference. Not that men necessarily have to be disagreeable, but it's more that women have historically needed to be more agreeable.
Yeah, it does seem that I think Jordan Peterson was saying that men are slightly more disagreeable, so there must be a reason for it. Or maybe there isn't. I'm just abstracting this idea from nothing.
I mean, it could be in terms of like competition with like other tribes, for example, when we're evolving, that Like it'd be the men who are the warriors, and they need to be maybe do more ruthless and inhumane things, which an agreeable person wouldn't want to do in order to protect the tribe.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that's the reason.
So it came from evolutionarily, maybe.
Yeah. And that maybe brings us on to why neuroticism is higher in women. And I think it's quite obvious that it's because women are more vulnerable, like they're smaller and weaker physically, and there's obviously a lot worse things that a man can do to them than would generally happen to another man, and a man would have a better because men are bigger, they'd have more ability to protect themselves. So the world is fundamentally a more dangerous place for women. So it makes sense that they'd be more risk averse, for example, and also more sensitive to negative emotion, being more easily put off by things in their environment. It makes sense that they'd be more cautious like that.
Yeah, it could be also, again, with the childbearing, like if evolutionarily women were the childminders, they do need to be more sensitive to that negative emotion that a child will bring, so they can fix that negative emotion and sort the child out. Something like that, maybe. Yeah. One thing that surprised me, though, was the extroversion. I don't know if that's maybe because my example of seeing people out in a social situation, a lot of it's come from getting drunk and like going on nights out, and usually you just see lads just acting like absolute twats, which is not in like a bad way, just it'd be funny. But now that I'm thinking about it, maybe girls are more extroverted because they act like absolute twats as well, just like making jokes and shit and videos. But that's what it was. It started to surprise me when it said women are maybe more extroverted than men on average. Can you think maybe why? I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know. I think presumably, I mean, from what I know, that would be the smallest difference out of the three we've just spoke about, like the agreeableness and neuroticism. I'm not actually sure which is the most different. I want to say it's neuroticism, but I'm not too sure, because I know with agreeableness it's that kind of 60-40 like comparison that I made earlier. So 60% of the time, if you guess a woman is more agreeable than a man, you'd be right 60% of the time. So it's that sort of difference. I think neuroticism might be a bigger difference than that, but I'm not too sure. But yeah, I haven't actually heard that before, that extroversion is different. So presumably it's a smaller difference. But I think that does, I'm not necessarily sure why, like evolutionary, that would occur, but I do think that makes sense, like just looking at the behavior of men and women, because I do think that and more like women do stay in touch with their friends more, for example, and
true,
and that type of thing, and yeah, I do feel like girls are kind of inherently a bit more social, and then men can be a bit more kind of
attitude.
Yeah, although I don't know, that it does kind of make sense to me. Although obviously I don't think it's probably the biggest difference, really.
Yeah, I guess not to get into stereotypes or whatever, but like it's the classic, like the mothers meeting when you're at school. Got to wait for your mother and then mother's meeting because the mothers are just chatting for fucking ages, whereas your dad pick you up and fucking get you home.
Yeah. Yeah, but the dads will just get you straight away and leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that does make sense, to be fair.
Yeah. Be interesting. I'll have to look up why it came from in terms of like evolutionary explanations.
Yeah. So it's 7 now. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or I think it's...
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered everything. Maybe come back to this in the future with more things and areas of it or something. But I think it's been a good episode so far. And we can finish it here, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good. It's been quite annoying. I feel like with my Wi-Fi is just shit at the moment, so I'm not sure. I'll try and edit the best I can for the viewing, but yeah, it's a bit frustrating. Hopefully, it's a bit better in future. But
Yeah, might be
yeah,
a bit jaggedy, that's right though. Yeah, I'll try and get my fucking camera, although it's sorted now, I'll try and sort that out.
yeah.
Get the extender correct one. Whatever. But yeah, any other news we need to say?
No, I think that's it from me.
Yeah, right then, well, let's wrap it up. Thank you for listening, guys. Sorry if the listening experience has been a bit hit and miss. We've had some problems with Wi-Fi outside of our control, unfortunately, so sorry about that. But ending it now, it is 7 p.m. Same day, same date. Thanks for listening. Please check us out on YouTube and Spotify if you want to listen on the go. Like and subscribe. Thank you. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.